Hey everyone, welcome to the Fireside Chat number 32 on Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today we are diving into money once again with our guest, Mike Bose. What are some of the things that you must make sure you have in order when thinking of your future financial planning at the get-go? The first time I talked to Mike, he set me straight on a short list of super important things. I'm talking before you invest or save or budget or anything, certain very important things need to get put in order. Mike also continues where he left off at the last fireside chat, where he opens up a big can of worms about saving and investing for retirement. Before we begin, a couple of quick things. Please join the conversation at facebook.com/crushingclassical as well as Crushing Classical on Instagram. If you love our content, it would mean the world to us for you to comment and share it with your classical musician friends and colleagues. I'd also like to thank Fix Music for being a sponsor of Crushing Classical Podcast. FixMusic.com is your online resource for affordable, high-quality sheet music. Fix also offers unique buying options for individuals, teachers, and schools. Whether you have a large private teaching studio or you run a music program, Fix has a solution for you. Contact them through their website for more information. Fix offers priority and priority express shipping at super affordable rates, meaning they do not pad their shipping rates to make money. If you need sheet music fast, Fix will expedite it to you as inexpensively as possible. Also, remember to use the discount code CRUSH and get 10% off your order. Let's get started. Hey, Mike. Hey, Eileen. How are you guys?
Great. How are you?
Great.
Hey.
Awesome.
Hey. So we are back today on the Fireside Chat to talk about money with Mike Bose. So I'm really excited to dive into this because I think maybe a week or two ago I posted on Facebook and Instagram and inside the Classical Cats group, what are your top financial concerns? And we got a lot of feedback. And it was pretty varied. And so we're going to start by talking about some of those topics. One of the things people really were concerned about is taxes and how to navigate, writing things off and all the different things that come with being a freelancer. And just anytime you're a musician, you're always going to have numerous sources of income from students and 1099s and W-2s and writing things off and what happens when you're a couple and all these things. And we're not going to dive into that too much today. We are looking for someone we can bring on to talk only about taxes for a whole episode. So we're gonna put that aside just for now, and we're gonna talk about some things like future planning for retirement and saving, long-term strategies and debt. Things that you're probably dealing with right now. So. You know what? I would like to start with one of the biggest realizations that I had when I first met Mike. Eileen introduced me to Mike a little over a year ago, and when we met, I divulged that we really didn't have anything in place for a will or life insurance or guardianship for our daughter. And it was this kind of thing that, like, you don't want to think about what happens when you die. Like, nobody wants to think about that, right? So I just was putting my head in the sand about it. So and you showed me a whole lot of stuff that was very important, and we got it all taken care of. And it was just like ripping off the Band-Aid, like, get this stuff in place because it's important. And so that's what I did. That's what David and I did first with Mike. So, Mike, I want to talk to you about life insurance first, because I think personally I've had a lot of misunderstanding about it. And, like, you get these weird leaflets in the mail, they fall out of magazines, and you get kind of numb to it. Like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Oh, my job provides that, so I don't need to buy that. Or
Well, yeah, and
you know,
actually, I'll just chime in here. The
yeah,
most common thing I've heard from people is, well, my job provides life insurance. Like whatever job I have. If you're in an orchestra, for example,
yeah.
there's probably a life insurance policy provided with, being in the orchestra. Maybe it's like 30 or 40 or $50,000, something like that. That's the most common thing I hear is I've already got life insurance. It's handled through my work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And David had that. So we kind of were like, okay, that's taken care of. And then we thought, oh, yeah, we should probably do a will someday. We'll do that when we get old because that's what old people have. And then, and
Right.
then with the
Yeah, I'm
guard,
not going to die. Yeah, I'm not going to die today. I'm not going to die tomorrow, so I don't need a will right now. I'm only in my 40s. I don't need a will right now, right?
exactly. And with the
Yep.
guardianship, it's just that is the scariest thing to think of. Like both of you dying, like this is
Right.
scariest thing to think about. So we would just be like, yeah, we got to do that and let's do it later and let's not think about it. Okay, let's talk about it later. Bye. You know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
That's very normal. I hear that every day.
I'll bet.
It's just one of
I'll
those
bet.
things that's really, really easy to put off. Um,
yeah.
and yet you're really doing, in the event that were to happen, a common accident between you and your spouse, is really, really putting not only your children in a really bad way, but the people you leave behind, trying to sort out, who gets what, who's going to raise the children, who's going to manage the money.
Hmm.
It's just a myriad of problems that if you would just take a couple hours and sit down and figure it out, and document it, have it notarized. I mean, I've even had clients go online and do it. You don't need to pay an attorney. You can go online and get a boilerplate basic will. At least that gets you started.
Oh, wow. That's cheaper than probably what we did. We kind
Yeah.
of forked over some dough for it, but I'm
It,
glad we
it,
did it, you know.
yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that you can, once you get it done, you can, again, file it and forget about it,
Hmm.
uh, at least for the next few years, depending on the age of the kids. But
Yeah.
um, so that's a huge thing. That's one of the things I really stay on my clients about. Um, just getting stuff done.
That's
Uh,
really interesting, Mike, what you just said about, you don't really think about the fact that what you're really doing when you don't put these things in place is you're having everybody, they're forced to make decisions for you because you didn't make any, or at least you didn't make them known. That's a problem.
right,
Yeah, and the
right.
thing that scared me the most that Eileen said actually before I talked to you about it, Mike, was that she said, you know, if you don't decide it, the state decides it.
That's
And
correct.
I was like, holy crap, I would not want that, you know?
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
right. The state decides who's going to be the guardian for the children,
Hmm.
um, and oftentimes they manage the money. Neither of which is, would be an ideal situation. I'll tell you that for me, the biggest motivation was that I didn't want people to think that Mike's a douchebag for not doing this while he's alive. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because if it's not done while, and you're gone, people are going to think, what were they thinking? You got young children, you got an estate. It's like, what do you?
Yeah. You weren't
So,
thinking ahead. You weren't taking care of people.
yeah, I didn't really care about anybody. And again, nobody thinks it's going to happen.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reality of it is, stuff happens. So,
It happens every day.
yeah, just get it done.
Right. And
And
you know what made me feel better? I was like, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, yeah, it does happen, but think of all the times it doesn't happen. So
yeah,
just do it. It's not like like, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but doing this and writing this stuff down does not make it that it's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I know this
right,
sounds totally
right,
superstitious, but like, looking at it, it doesn't make it happen. Just looking at
right,
it makes sure that if it does happen, everything's taken care of. So,
right. And
yeah.
I might add that there are four major things that people should be thinking about as it relates to a will,
Okay.
and especially with children. The first thing you should be thinking about is who do you want to raise the children?
Hmm.
And I typically recommend you put two or three people deep,
Hmm.
because oftentimes the people at the top of the list, they may choose not to take on that responsibility. And by the way, grandparents are typically not the best people to put in that role.
Right.
So two or three people deep to as guardians for the children. And by the way, you want to have a conversation with these people ahead of time as well.
Hmm.
Let them know that they're on the list. It really affirms them, that they're at the stature in your mind that they that you view them so highly that to raise their children. Um, and so that's always a fun. Actually, it's a fun conversation. It's not a negative. The second thing has to do with who's going to manage the money. Typically, the best parents are not necessarily the best money managers. And so picking a trustee for somebody to manage the money is very, very important. Also, relative to the trustee, you want to make sure that in the will that you define at what age do you want the kids to get your money. If it's life insurance proceeds or if it's assets that you have. If you don't define it in the will, when the kids turn 18, legally it's their money. I don't know about you, but when I was 18, if I had a lot of money dumped in my lap, it probably would not have been a good thing. And
Yeah,
so,
I mean, in Tracy's case, it definitely would have gone to the bars. Just kidding. I'm totally kidding. But seriously, like you always end up buying like nonsense.
great
You
for the
always end
local
up,
economy.
yeah.
Yeah, I would have had cute clothes at the bar too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she would have had cute clothes and shoes.
Yeah, shoes, lots of shoes.
Lots of shoes.
So you might think about just ages of distribution, like giving them some when they're 22, someone when they're 25, some when they're 28, something along those lines. You might also add, the kids have to be drug-free, they have to be contributing to society, just whatever you value, that you can add that to the will. And if the kids are, screwing up, then they're not going to get their estate. And then the last thing to be thinking about is that you need to put something in the will that says that whoever is managing the money has to invest it for preservation of capital. And I would use those words. In other words, you don't want the trustee getting approached by Uncle Charlie with some harebrained investment that they're going to take your money and invest it for the benefit of the kids, with the chance of losing it all.
Right.
You want them investing with the idea that you want to preserve whatever's there. You want to preserve it and grow it conservatively until the kids reach that age.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are four things that I just recommend people think about before they sit down and go through the will process. Those are the four biggies, in my opinion.
And who do you recommend for a trustee? Like, can you give any examples of who a good one would be versus a bad one? I'm just curious because there's like this, you don't want the selfish brother to get it. You want I don't know, like is it a personality thing? How do you pick the trustee?
It's really more just, for me, it's a gut instinct. There's always somebody in the family who you feel is, responsible and level-headed and
good with money.
It'd typically be that person.
Mm-hmm.
You could also let, depending on the size of the estate, you could also let a bank trustee department be that entity. I personally rather use somebody that I know and respect. It doesn't have to be family; it can be a friend.
Okay.
But just somebody that you respect, that you have, it's got their act together.
That makes sense.
And it doesn't have to be the most wealthy person, It's just, again, it's gut instinct on who you respect in that area.
Right. Cool.
And something tied to the will planning is life insurance planning. Life insurance is a very, very misunderstood vehicle. And what's interesting is that there's a ton of opinions on it. In fact, you ask almost anybody, and people have a very, very visceral response to that.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
You're right.
And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But I always look at life insurance planning, and my recommendation is always to insure yourself for what you're worth. Now, what does that mean? Well, in life, generally, we always insure any of our assets for what they're worth. So if you have a house that's worth $250,000 and the house burns down, you want to replace that value. So you would want to insure it for $250,000 plus all the contents. And And it's the same with any asset that we own. I know, Tracy, you guys have high-end violins.
Yeah.
If something were to happen to them in a fire or a flood or whatever, you want them replaced for the value that they are. And so when it comes to life insurance, for some reason, we're always, and I think I know the reason, but we're always looking at what does my beneficiary need? The word need always comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, life insurance is so disliked. People want to buy just as little as they can, and they don't want to spend a penny more for it than they have to.
Totally true. I remember that I used to sell life insurance back in my 20s, and that's exactly how it was. And people would argue with me about it.
Right.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
And people have this, I mean, for some reason, people get really, there's some lunacy around life insurance that's really, really odd. But people always think it's a need, A. They always think about how little can I get away with, B. This is my favorite. Well, my wife is hot, so she'll remarry. Are you serious? Did you just say that?
Oh my God, are you kidding?
I've heard it. You wouldn't believe how many times. It's like you can't be serious.
Oh my God.
And so again, people have this approach, this needs-based approach to life insurance, which to me makes no sense.
Was there ever historically something that happened that made people get really turned off to life insurance? Was there ever like some kind of scam or?
No, there were a few people. There's always in one generation. Each generation. There's always one voice, one talking head that gets the ear of the public and gets them thinking in ways that are very misleading. But it's true. I'll come back to that in a second. When it comes to life insurance, everybody has an economic value. Whether you're a full-time musician or you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, you have value. And generally, it's accepted that whatever you earn on an annual basis, if you multiply that times 20 times or 25 times, that's the most you can buy in life insurance. You can't buy any more than that. So if you're making $50,000 a year, if you multiply that times 20, that's $1 million. So if you're making $50,000 a year, the most you could buy generally is in the neighborhood of $1 million.
Okay.
That's considered your economic life value. And that's the number everybody should be shooting for.
Okay.
So take your salary, take your annual income and multiply it by 20, and that's the amount of life insurance you should get.
Correct.
Okay. And by the way, why is that? Is there a reasoning for that?
In any insurance, you can't overinsure what the value of an asset. So if your home is worth $250,000, you can't buy $1 million worth of insurance on it.
Right.
Why would that be? Is
that because someone could, burn it down and say, "Oh, now I can have $1 million house"?
Exactly. You might be tempted to torch it if you're going to get if you're going to realize a gain from it. Insurance, you can't realize a gain. Mm-hmm. All you can do is insure something for what it's worth.
That makes sense.
And so if you're making 50, you can't insure yourself for $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Some of you might want to off your spouse if that were the case.
Right.
But that answers your question, Eileen. There can never be a gain as it relates to insurance. You can only insure what it's worth.
Okay.
So if you don't have 20 times your income, you should call your insurance agent or go online somewhere. Just buy term insurance. Term insurance is so cheap today. The average 35, 40, 45-year-old can insure themselves for up to $1 million for very little. And so I highly recommend that. That's a huge deal. I'm a protection first guy. Whenever whenever I work with somebody, I always make sure their protection area is maxed out.
Yeah,
And
and that reminds me, you even had us increase some insurance on our home, like an umbrella policy of some kind,
yeah,
so that just
every,
in case
every
someone falls down the stairs or whatever, who's
right. Or
visiting.
if you hit somebody with your car and you get sued, you want maximum protection in that event as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody should be buying $1 million liability umbrella. That's again, it's basic, but again, most people do not own them, and it's a huge value to add to your portfolio.
Yeah, and it wasn't
Yeah,
that one was not expensive. I mean, for the whole
No,
year, it
that's true.
wasn't. It was
Yeah,
nothing.
very
Yeah.
and this is the kind of thing that you want to buy when you're younger, right? Because like term insurance, like life insurance,
yeah,
you're going to get a better premium when you're healthier.
Mm-hmm.
correct. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And you can get all different types of term insurance. You can get 20-year or 30-year level premium, which means your premiums never go up for 20 years. They stay the same.
Okay.
And so even though you're getting older, your costs stay the same.
So, and then is there something that can happen with that insurance later, like when you're, when it's getting to the end of the term or
Yeah,
something? Okay. And then
yeah.
what do you do with it?
You have most companies offer a conversion privilege, which allows you to convert your term to a more permanent type contract. Um, I like to use the analogy of, term insurance is like renting an apartment.
Okay.
Permanent insurance is like buying a house, in that you're building up equity. It costs you more every year, but you're building equity, and at some point in the future, you're going to own it, and it will be enforced forever. Whereas with term insurance, once that 20 years is over, you have to either reapply and buy another 20-year term, or you just let it terminate and it goes away.
So what does that mean when so now you own the policy? Like what is
That means the death benefit never goes away.
Oh, so even if you die of old age in your bed, you still get the money.
Correct.
Okay.
Or your beneficiaries will receive the death benefit.
I see. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
And so the money that you've been paying into on the term, does that go into that next policy that you get, or it's
No,
not? No.
no.
Okay.
You're just with term insurance, you're just paying for your chance of dying that 1 year.
Okay.
If you don't die, you lose whatever you put in.
Mm-hmm.
And so term insurance is just pure protection.
Mm-hmm.
And until you've got the cash flow to convert it, I recommend people buy term insurance.
That makes
Uh,
sense.
Again, understand that long term, it's a huge cost, because you have to die to win,
Right.
and dying to win is never a good strategy.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about pure protection for people, out of the chute when they're getting started, or they have a family or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. And I think just starting in that square one, like the protection level of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then if should we can move on to and if we come back to this because it comes up, that's fine too. But
Yeah.
let's move on to debt
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people have a ton of student loan debt. And some people, including myself, some people wrote in and said, I don't know how to manage this. One person wrote in, I heard that you could even get your student loan debt forgiven in certain cases, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's worth more research. But actually, I think if you get that, if you want to have that possibility, you have to consider that before you take out the loans. Like there's some things you can do, like teaching in low income schools and stuff that you might be able to have it forgiven after a certain amount of payments after you've already done that teaching as like your part of your payment. But
Mm-hmm.
once you've got all the debt, and I was saying to Eileen the other day, when you go into debt for graduate school, say, because a lot of times people, I mean, sometimes people nowadays probably take out loans for undergrad and graduate school because it's so expensive. But I know that when I did it, it was such an emotional decision
Mm,
to sign my life away on those papers. I don't care how much it is. I don't care when I have to start paying it. All I know is that I'm safe and I'm working towards a better future when I'm in school, and I feel better about that. So I feel better about that. So I don't care about the future as far as paying it back. And
mhm,
so I know that's hard to admit, but that's where I was coming from with that. And so then
mm,
I got out of school, and there are like low income deferments, and you can, I think that's part of why my number was so high for a while. I mean, it's coming down now because I'm paying on it, but it was really high for a while, and it stayed there because I was in low income deferment, and the interest was still accruing even though I wasn't paying. But I think there are things you can do if you're in real trouble, but
mm.
getting out of that kind of debt, I don't know. Would you be in a hurry to get out of student loan debt, Mike, or would you be thinking about saving first? I mean, like there's got to be a way that you can maybe not pay the student loan back as fast or something. I don't know.
Uh, there are programs out there that allow you to either um, shift from a higher interest account or loan to a lower interest rate. So obviously that would be better than paying a higher interest rate.
Right.
The longer you defer the uh, the payment, like you said, that interest just continues to accrue, even though it's a lower amount. Big picture is you're gonna pay for it somewhere down the road. One creative way that I've talked about with my clients, at least offered it, is that if you have if you're living in a home that has any equity at all, maybe taking an equity line of credit out of the house to use toward paying down student loans. I know you get to tax deduct some of the interest that you're paying on your loans today,
Hmm.
but that allows you to take, if you have equity in your house, it's a good place to do it. I have other clients who are in the rental business. They like buying rental homes or flipping homes, whereby they can buy a house, right, they can build up equity and sell it, and taking a chunk of that money as well to pay down on student loans is another idea. So those are just a couple thoughts.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
I always recommend people pay the minimum and try to save what they would have built otherwise. Debt generally, again, if you think about the financial institutions, they want to they want to recapture their money as soon as they can. And what happens is that if you're accelerating your payments, you are obviously going to pay it off sooner. But the problem is you don't have any money.
I was going to say, yeah, that's the
Right.
problem right there. Hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question. A long time ago, I heard of this concept, and I think it works. But where you take the same amount of money that you would normally pay per month, but you divide it into two equal payments, so it's the same amount, but
Uh-huh.
you're throwing it at the loan. It's at more frequent intervals, and it somehow it goes towards the principal more than the interest when you do that.
Yeah, what you're effectively doing is you're paying one extra principal payment a year.
Okay. But you
So
don't
you're
even have
paying,
to add extra money. You're just dividing it in two and putting it out twice.
yeah, that's because they're getting their money back quicker.
Okay.
And so therefore you're reducing your principal by roughly one payment annually. Here again, the argument that I would have is that you're you're giving your money to the bank
Uh-huh.
quicker. It's the same argument of a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage.
I see.
You're paying less interest and you're getting it paid off quicker, but again, they have the money.
Right. Where you could have been putting in a savings account and building up that savings for
Where you
investing. Yeah, for you. Right.
you control it, you own it, and so forth. So that is one strategy you will hear in the marketplace. Bi-weekly mortgage payments.
Hmm. Well, speaking of saving, we talked about yesterday when we were on the phone. You told me a really great story about when you graduated.
Yeah.
And I want you to share that story because it was such a good story. And at the end of the story, I was like, what? So I want you to share that story.
Right. Um, So on our last call, what I talked about was the 4 rules that all financial institutions work by.
Mm-hmm.
They want our money. They want it systematically. They want us to reinvest interest and dividends, and they don't want to give us anything back.
Right.
It's the whole game, the whole chess game that we're all playing is designed for them to control our wealth and give us back as little as possible.
Ugh.
And so, under the heading of that, is that when I graduated from college, I was given 2 pieces of advice. One was never pay more for something than it's worth. And the second one is never go into debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I did was when I got out of college, I developed the habit of saving money. And so I would save, and then I needed a car. So what I did was rather than financing a car, I just went in and dumped my cash account and paid cash for the car.
Right.
So all my money's gone, but I got this new car. So then I started saving. Then I started saving again, like I was told to do, save. And then I met my wife, and I needed to buy a ring, and I didn't have any money. So I went and paid cash for a ring, and I gave up all my money. And so I started saving, and then we wanted to buy a house, and I didn't have a down payment, so I emptied the savings account to put down on a house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, my buddy, when he graduated, he couldn't wait to buy a car. So he went to the car dealer and he walks in and he says, "Hey, I have good credit, but I don't have any cash." And so they said, "No problem. We'll just finance it for you." So what he did from day one is he bought the new car and went into debt for it and started paying it back. About the time that he got it paid back, he met a girl and wanted to get married and needed to borrow money for a ring. So he goes into debt at the local jewelry store and starts making payments back to the jewelry store.
Mm-hmm.
And then along comes children, so they need to buy a minivan. So he goes back to the dealership to finance another car. So 20 years later, we're meeting at our reunion. And we're sitting down and he shares with me, he said, "You know, man, I've really screwed up." He said, in the last 20 years, I've made good money, but I have nothing to show for it because I was always having to go into debt to buy, to finance my life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him, I said, that's kind of funny because I did everything that I was told to do, and I don't have any money either.
Yeah, because you spent it all on, you just kept on clearing your savings account.
I was told that paying cash, and people, it's funny in the marketplace you'll see today, people are very pompous and proud of the fact that we owe nobody. We pay cash for everything.
Yeah, that's a total.
Oh, yeah.
That's a total pompous ass statement that happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a badge of pride that people say, "Oh, we don't have no debt. We pay cash for everything."
Yep.
Well, the reality of it is that there is a finance cost to every financial decision you make, in that you're either borrowing money and paying somebody else interest, or you're paying cash and losing what interest you could have earned.
Right.
And so, going back to the way we're taught to think about how we deal with debt and finances generally, is the fact that people who pay cash, it's actually worse than financing, but it's people who pay cash are no better than people who finance. Because at the end of the day, you're going to end up somewhere down the road and you're not going to have any money.
Either way.
Either way.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what got me about the story was that, wow, like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
That's right.
So now, not to be a horse's ass about it, but what's the answer to all this?
You can be a horse's ass.
Please, Yoda, please do share with us, Yoda. What is the ultimate answer, Yoda?
It comes naturally, doesn't it, Eileen? So the answer to that is basically creating your own source of capital so that you can borrow from yourself and pay yourself back.
Oh,
we all have one exponential curve, which I'm not going to get into today, but we all have one exponential curve in life, which is the growth of our money over time. And if I can borrow from myself and pay myself back, then I've basically eliminated the financial institution from my life. I'm not paying back a bank. I'm paying back myself. And if I can collateralize it, meaning when I take money out, I'm really not taking money out. I'm just borrowing against it. That's even better.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways of doing it. The best way and the most ideal way to do it is there is a specially designed life insurance contract. Now, going back to our earlier conversation, this is more of a permanent type vehicle where when I talk about building up equity in a life insurance contract, you can withdraw that money, and you don't have to wait till you're 60 to do it. You can withdraw it before you're 60. And it continues to earn interest and dividends, even though even though I took money out of it.
Okay.
So it continues to grow. And while I'm borrowing from it and paying myself back, it continues to earn interest and dividends. And I get to recapture those payments that I was giving to the bank. I get to put them into an asset that I own.
Wow.
Versus the bank, which I don't own.
Okay. That makes sense.
So there is an uninterrupted compounding of money that I have access to.
Okay, so say you have one of those insurance policies, and you borrow from yourself. Okay, so you essentially own it. That's what you're saying, because you're paying into it, and then you
Right.
build equity into it, just like a house.
That's right.
And then you can take out of it, just like you would if you had equity in your house. Like you can take an equity line of credit. So,
Correct.
but that's to a bank. So in this case, you own it. So you take out a line of credit. How would you be also? So I'm assuming this isn't. Is this to buy a car or to buy? Or is
Sure,
this
anything.
anything? Or is
Right.
it to take it out and invest it in other things? Or is it to
Could be
get out of debt? Or is it all of the above?
all the above.
Okay.
Right.
And so then you say, okay, so now I just did that. I'm going to pay myself back. I just bought a car and I took $20,000 out, and now I want to pay myself back $300 a month. And you're just putting money back into that fund for yourself, and you're at the same time building up your life insurance policy.
Correct. That's right.
Interesting.
Wow.
What
This is the Ninja Warrior version of investing.
Yeah.
Now,
And
what
so with the life insurance policy, is that money invested in I don't know, stocks and bonds? Like, what's going on with that?
No, it's invested with whatever company you have. They're investing it for you.
Okay.
But what's even more powerful is the fact that when you borrow money from a bank to finance a car, you have to finance it from whatever the current value that you're borrowing down to zero.
Yeah.
So let's say you're buying a $30,000 minivan. You have the payments that you're going to make to the bank are based on you paying that 30,000 down over, let's say, a 5-year period. Right? You're paying it down to zero.
Right.
Well,
Right.
if you think about it, in 5 years, that minivan is going to be worth, let's say it's going to be worth 10 grand.
Yeah.
So by borrowing from yourself and paying yourself back, all you really have to do is finance from 30 down to 10.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then
Because
you sell
have
it
an
then.
asset that's worth $10,000 in 4 or 5 years. So you can really get the same vehicle with less of a payment if it's going back to your bank
Okay.
into the life insurance contract.
And you're saying you pay it down to 10 because maybe now that the car, you've had it and now your kids are grown up and you don't need a minivan.
You're going to trade it in 5 years.
Right.
Right. Everybody knows that generally people trade every 5 or 6 years for a new car, or their car
Sure.
wears out or whatever.
Right.
So
Sure.
rather than being dictated by the financial institutions where you're financing from 30 to 0. Let's finance it from 30 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
Your payments would be less.
Right.
It's
That
just
makes
like
sense.
that's effectively what a lease is. When you
Okay.
lease a car, there's what's called a residual value on the car. It's going to they're projecting it's going to be worth X amount of dollars in 5 years.
Right.
And so what you do is you finance it from the current cost down to that value in 5 years. You're not paying it from 30 to 0. That's why your payments on a lease are less.
Man, when you describe it like that, it makes me think it's not a good idea to buy a car, like with a by getting a loan from the bank or the car dealer.
Well, it's not, there are better ways to do it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want you to catch the concept, the fact that, by the way, you'll notice that on some of these, when financing cars, as an example, today you'll see an ad that'll say you can get 0.9% financing or $4,000 in cash.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's always either or. And so again, by giving up you're always better if you have either equity in your house or life insurance or some other access of money, you're always better to take the cash versus the 0.9.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Because again, you can take, they'll either give you cash or they'll reduce the value of the price of the car by that amount.
And it's always better to have the cash.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So isn't it weird to think, okay, I have this life insurance policy. This is supposed to be for when I die, and I'm using it, and then
Right.
I don't know, like, do people feel bad about it? Like, it's kind
Feel
of
bad.
No, but like how it goes back to the mindset thing we were talking about. I'm talking about the fear of debt mindset. I'm talking about that.
Yep.
This is something that my husband has. It's
Yep.
deeply ingrained.
Yep.
And so
Yeah, he has to pay cash for everything. Literally.
yeah, I mean, like when you told that story about paying cash, I was like, that's my husband. And so even though we've had like numerous conversations in the last year where you've tried to introduce new concepts, and I understand now. I'm like, yeah, I get why you don't want to pay off things so that the banks can have all your money and you have nothing, and they're
Right.
happy and they don't care about you. They just want their cash back. And
Yeah, they could care less. Yeah.
yeah, and
totally.
so I get why debt isn't a bad thing. Obviously, you don't want to have tons and tons of credit card debt. That doesn't make sense. But
Right.
but
Right.
in this situation, you have to kind of change your point of view about debt and borrowing, even if you are borrowing from yourself, right?
Right.
You
Right.
have to start thinking in a totally different way
Right.
so that you can feel comfortable with it, is what I'm saying.
If you think about it from the bank's perspective, a loan is an asset.
Yeah.
Loans make them money. They love to loan
That's
money.
why they buy loans.
That's why they buy loans. That's right. That's why they sell loans.
Mhm.
So if you own the bank, loans are good. So if you own an insurance contract that you can borrow from and pay back into, that's a great asset.
Yeah.
It's a different way of
It's a
thinking,
different way of thinking about it.
right? And not to belabor this point, but I'd like to shift thinking just momentarily, and we can come back to this. But as it relates to money generally, how you think about money is more important than what financial product you buy. This is a big picture concept. How you think is more important than what you buy. And here's how I can prove that. Have you ever known anybody who had a lot of money, but they were miserable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
Many.
they were miserly.
Mhm.
Money seemed to control their lives.
Mm-hmm.
There is a myth in the financial world that says the more money you have, the more peaceful you'll be, or more safe you will feel. But the reality of it, in my experience, is that if you're living life from a fear-based scarcity perspective, the more money you have, the more you have to lose. And so therefore you're not more content, or you're not more peaceful, you're more scared.
Yep.
This is a this is one of those things that the financial institutions have put on the public, which I think is horrible. This is sinful because what they try to do is they try to get you to focus on the nest egg. How big can I make my nest egg?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The nest egg becomes the goal.
Yep.
And the thought of spending money or living life or gifting or setting up charities, I mean, that's so foreign to a lot of people. And it's because they've been taught that the nest egg is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the thing that most people really need to think about before they get started with any investment approach is, how are you thinking? Are you thinking from a fear-based scarcity perspective, or are you thinking from a love-based abundance mentality? And that goes back to that life insurance question we talked about earlier, as far as how much should somebody own. If you're thinking from a love-based abundance perspective, you're going to get all that you can get. If you're thinking from a fear-based scarcity negative perspective, that probably won't resonate very well with you.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense to you too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it
Yeah, totally.
does. Like you're going, I only want to spend a certain amount of money on my cheap life insurance because my wife will find someone else after I die and it doesn't matter
Right.
anyway, instead of thinking I want to make sure she gets the maximum possible,
Right. Right.
regardless of what she does after I die, you know?
Exactly. It has nothing to do with your beneficiary. It has to do with leaving a mark in this world.
Yeah.
Whether it's setting up a charity for underprivileged children, whether it's funding your favorite charity, it's leaving, funding kids and grandkids college. It's being all that you can be economically.
Yeah, it's shifting your view into what you actually really want for your life and after you leave, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty big picture idea there.
Is that too big? Too crazy?
No.
No, because what it does is it takes you out of, oh my gosh, I have to pay off my student loans and that's my only goal, you know? Like, really? Like, okay, so I'm looking at, I have a student loan and it's going to get paid, by the time I pay it off, it's from right now, and maybe it's, I don't know, I haven't checked in a while, but 17 years from now, you know, and you
Mm-hmm.
think, what if I pay it off earlier and then it's 17 years, and then it's only 10 years or 8 years? It's still a long time. And if
That's
I,
so funny. That's interesting.
I'm
Yeah, I have a
saying,
different view of that.
I'm
Yeah.
just, no, I'm saying like if this is how I was being about it,
Uh-huh.
I would be so narrowly focused, not thinking about what I want from my life in the big
Right.
picture. Like all the things you just described, like feel so good to think about. Like, what if you were really thinking about your grandchildren, like being able to pay for your grandchildren's
Mm-hmm.
school or a charity or something even bigger picture than yourself, as opposed to I just need to get out of this debt,
Right.
you know? Such a
Right.
small-minded way of looking.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny because I'm still paying on a student loan, and I purposely made it. The interest is not that much. Interest on student loans is pretty low.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because I really, I'll be honest, I'm 43 right now. Part of me, I know this is probably not going to happen because there's not much left to pay on it. But I've always thought to myself, if I died with that student loan still, I don't care. Like, I make the payment as low as I can because I don't care. Like, all I care about is that I'm meeting the requirement, whatever it is they want me to send them, so that they don't, trash my credit or whatever, right? And the rest of it, I don't care. I don't care that I owe that money. I could care
Right.
less.
Right.
I don't
Right.
care because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to ruin my life over. I'm not going to ruin my life over a debt payment. I'm not doing
Right.
it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a
I'm
great
going
way
to
to
live
come
today.
at it. That's a really great way to think about it because
Yep.
it's your life. It's your life.
Right.
And by the way, I just want to add this. I mean, Mike and Tracy, you may not know this, but you can call whoever I mean, I'm just telling you this from experience. You can call whoever your loan, like whoever holds your loan for your school. And, if you play the world's largest violin and I'm having a really hard time and this is too much for me, whatever, they will let you lower your payments ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ridiculously low. I mean, I've been on, no kidding, I've been on a $25 a month payment before.
Mm.
Not joking.
Sweet.
Right.
Yep, they let me do that for, I think it was a year and a half, and then they called me and said, "Hey, can we raise?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go up to 50."
Mm.
True story. So a lot of people I think are paying too much on their student loans. I'm just telling you, like you can get your payments so much lower. So many people are like, "Oh, I have to pay $300 or $400 a month because of the loan to whatever ratio or whatever the hell they call it." Not
Mm.
true. Not
Right.
true. I'm living proof of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to go and
Not
have a conversation.
Yeah, you just need to go have a conversation with them and let
Yeah.
them know that, you know, you got to let them know that you can't afford it. That's the way it is. You know, it actually works, believe it or not. I mean, whoever's holding your loan.
Mm.
That's
So,
very good to know. That's very good to
yeah,
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
totally.
I mean, and
I've
my
done it.
student loan has been sold already twice or once. It was a,
Mine was sold 3 times. Yep,
uh-huh.
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
totally.
So they
Just
just,
know there are loan programs. There are many loan programs to help you, and you can lower your payments. I mean, ridiculously low. You can lower them.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep that in mind. I just want to let you guys know that, whatever they say the minimum payment is, I promise you, is not the minimum payment. It's not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm a living example of that.
And instead of, it's and like you're just giving an example of the way that you look at it. Like, I don't care how long it takes me to pay this off. I'm just not even going to think about it. I'm just going to pay the
Yeah,
lowest possible amount
that's
and
what I
not
do.
think about it instead of like,
Yep.
oh my God, this is this big. I mean, if you go and look at the numbers, like what I remember looking at the number on the screen going, I mean, that's just an insane amount of money. So
Mm-hmm.
either I can make it mean that like, oh, this is I can't get out from under it. It's a burden or whatever. Or you just like you figure out what works for you and make it happen.
Well, and this is a question, why is it a burden if it's just a number on a page? Why is that a
Right.
burden? How is that a
Right.
burden? It's not a burden. As long as you can afford the payment, and if you don't want to pay as much as you're paying, I promise you, you can get a much, much, much lower payment than you have right now. And that payment will go forever, but who cares?
Right. Right.
Who cares? The
Right.
numbers, the amount of debt that I have, whatever that is, I just don't bellyache over it. As long as I'm making payments and I'm keeping an agreement that I have with that company or whatever, I don't care. It does not impact my life day to day. I don't care.
Right.
Right. Right.
And and I realize I'm probably different the way that I think about this.
You
I
are,
yeah.
but it's healthy. I mean, you're not focused on lack. You're focused on, I'm just going to negotiate this deal to
Yep.
something that works for me. And then I'm going to go on with my life.
That's right.
Exactly.
Because I'm going to keep as much cash as I can always.
Right. Right.
Yep.
I'm going to keep as much income as I can keep. That's my goal. They get as little as possible because if I kick off and that debt is still there, I don't care.
Right.
I mean, who cares if that debt is still there? What do I care?
Right.
I think that badge of honor, being debt free is ridiculous. I've always thought it was ridiculous.
Yep.
It's better if I owe them money than if they've got all my money. That's how I think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
The key is having cash.
Yep.
Cash is
Building
king.
cash is king. Building up savings accounts, and for a lot of people on the call, getting to a level of savings is one of the first things you should do. And I don't really care if it's 5% or 8% or 10% of whatever you earn. Developing the habit of putting that into a segregated savings account once a month or once a quarter, whatever, however you get paid. Developing the habit of just setting that money aside is one of the best things anybody can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I have a quick question about the life insurance policy that you said you could start to build equity into and borrow from yourself. Because earlier you had said that the best life insurance to get when you're young is a term life, and that's because it's more affordable.
Right.
So would you say that once you have more savings built up, that would be when you could switch to
Yeah.
that other kind of equity building life insurance policy that you can start to be your own
Yes.
bank essentially? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you should have money in the bank in order to do that. Is that right?
Yeah, you don't want to get started with, just out of the chute. When you're young, again, you're starting out, you don't have a lot of assets, or you don't have a lot of savings. And
Right.
so having protection is more important than what kind of coverage you have. You should always have the max protection.
Okay.
Mm.
So
And
over
so
time, you go from protection to building wealth.
you convert it over time. You don't do it all at once. Obviously, if you had the cash flow out of the gate, that would be great because you're starting the process earlier. But
So,
most people don't have that luxury.
so when you buy,
Sure.
yeah, right. So when you buy that insurance policy, are you insuring your life for the same amount that you would have done for your term life immediately, like say $1 million or something?
No, typically you would convert it in little chunks. So in other words,
Oh,
say you would convert 200,000,
I
and
see.
so now you would have 200,000 of permanent and 800,000 of term. In other words, you would keep the million gross, but you would slowly convert it to to permanent.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you don't have equity until you've been paying for that for a while.
Correct. Into
And
this after the first year.
okay, and then you build equity not just from your payments, but also from the investment, the return on the investments that they're doing for you while you're paying into
Correct.
it. Okay, I understand now. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up because I thought, oh, can't you just pull it out and you have $1 million right away? No, because that would
No,
cost a lot of money to do.
correct.
Okay,
Just like when you buy a home,
right,
you,
right,
you're
right.
you're not going to build equity for a couple years,
Yeah.
and it's the same. It's the same way.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds great.
It's a phenomenal tax shelter for people who have money and people who are aspiring to save for the future. It's for a lot of reasons, which we can go into perhaps at another time. But it's a phenomenal asset to own, um, because it does give you a lot of flexibility, and it allows you have access to your money. With most people, they're putting monies into pensions, 401ks, IRAs.
Yes.
All those things lock you out of your money till you're 60.
So that was my
Hmm.
next question. So this is the alternative to all those things.
Correct. This is one of them. Yes.
One of them. Oh, there's more. Okay.
There's more.
Well, Mike is a magic maker, man. He's not going to give away all his secrets on this
I
call.
know, and there's going to be options too.
It's
I'm
all
glad
about
you,
Right?
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was my next question. I wanted to, because we had talked about it last time on the last episode was that all those typical plans that job would put you into aren't the best way because they lock up your money and don't let you have it. And then when it's time that you can actually have it, they only want to dole it out in small amounts and
right.
they're in control of it, which totally sucks to, if you ask me. So and you brought up pensions and the musicians union has a pension, but we've been, and I talked this to you about this on the last call as well, that they're having trouble and we keep getting letters every, 3 or 4 months, like
They're
just
like
want to keep you informed.
death threats, death threats from the union.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just want to let you know this is probably failing. And
Hey
like,
guys, we're doing the best we can. We just wanted to
Right.
check in and let you know we're doing the best we can.
yeah, they send me a big pile of papers that say
That's their
that.
that's their get out of jail free card.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
That should be a red blinking light for everybody.
yeah.
right.
What that means is that from a fiduciary standpoint, that's a fancy term, but basically what that means is that they're telling you that they're probably not going to make that fund is not going to make it.
Yep.
Right.
And if if they're giving you a buyout offer, you're better to take whatever they're giving you today than a hoped for amount of money, 20 years from today.
Okay. I don't think they've done that yet, but that's good to know for when they do.
You will be hearing about it because all the major companies in America are trying to get rid of their pensions.
Yep.
Mm.
They're losing boatloads of money, so they're trying to offer early outs, with cash today.
So what you're saying is if they offer a buyout, it's probably wise to do it because you're going to get less later, probably,
If anything.
if
Oh,
anything. Okay. Yep.
wow.
Right.
Because I know a lot of musicians have paid into the pension. Not every orchestra does the pension contribution. I know the orchestra here does not, but I've paid into it from other gigs that I've done. So I have, and so has David from other orchestra jobs he's had. So we have, some in there.
Right.
So what you're really saying is, Tracy, they should take the buyout when it's offered.
Okay.
Yeah, they will offer it. You'll be getting calls or emails or letters. Probably if they're calling you already, letting you know that they're struggling. I would definitely think about getting the money out now and running.
Okay. Well, as soon as we get that,
don't walk.
By
Run.
law, yeah, by law, I mean if the pension folds, you get nothing.
Wow.
Right.
If you look at all like GM and Delco and a lot of the car companies, pensions just folded. All those employees walked away with nothing.
Yep.
That's awful. After paying into it all those years, every single
Yep.
paycheck, you see that money going away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's bad.
Good to know. That's really
Yep.
good to know.
Really good to know.
Hey, by the way, Mike, I just want to go back to something. Remember how you talked earlier about the exponential curve? And I know we're not going to get into that, but you know how you talked about that?
Yeah.
So just to be really, blunt about it, what happens if somebody feels like their life is not an exponential curve, but rather a downward spiral? How so? Like the line on the graph is looking squiggly and downward and not so good. What is the solution to that, or what do you think? If somebody was trying to get it right from here, whatever that looks like, because a lot of people. Financial education has not been real good for
Right.
most people. A lot of people just feel like they've screwed the whole damn thing up.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what you have to say about that, because I think everybody would love to think they were on the exponential curve, but I think a lot of people, when you talk to them today, most people are just living to paycheck and just not
Yep.
really getting their shit together. So I
Yeah.
just want to know what you think about that.
Well, first of all, I would recommend or I would tell people to not feel like they're alone. There's just a lot of people out there in the same boat.
Mhm.
And everybody's case is different. Everybody's situation is unique, and for whatever reason, they are where they are. But there's a very, very high percentage of people who are in that living paycheck to paycheck realm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And so it's a little bit difficult to make, comments or suggestions without knowing the specific situation. But assuming that, they're making some money and they've got, they're doing some things right, I would recommend looking at restructuring, who they're paying, and how much they're paying, if they can restructure their debt to give them relief.
Mhm.
Again, if they have equity in their house, taking a new 30-year mortgage to lower the payment to save interest, or to roll non-tax deductible debt into a mortgage,
Mhm.
again, to free up. It's really all about cash flow. How do you?
Cash. So you're really talking about freeing up cash. That's really your recommendation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And whatever cash you can free up, then save that. And so you need to build up cash reserves. And I don't really care where you put it. Immediately, I would just say a savings account. You don't want to be taking risks in the market with it. In other words, you don't want to take whatever you're saving and put it into a Fidelity or the Vanguard 500 index fund. It's God's gift to everybody.
Or so they say, right?
Because the stock you can lose money in those vehicles.
Yeah.
And when your back's against the wall and you're just getting started, the last thing you want to do is take risks with the savings that you've created.
Interesting. Because a lot of people go, "Oh, I have several $100. I can buy some Apple stock." I think a lot of people do that. They go, "Oh, I can take, whatever the shares are selling for today.
Yep.
I wish I would have bought Apple stock back when it was cheap, but now it's really expensive. But if I buy, 5 shares of Apple, like take my money and buy 5 shares of Apple stock, like that's a lot of people think they can, double, triple, whatever their money that way by doing those sort of fast
Right.
purchases. What do you? Because I'm sure there are people on the call that probably think that way.
It never works.
Okay.
Really?
The only reason people take risks with their money is if they feel like they're behind the eight ball. The last train has just left the station, and they got to get on it quick.
Right.
And so, how can we make this small amount of money a big amount of money in a short amount of time?
Yep.
And so, the one extreme is buying lottery tickets.
Sure.
Right? That would be the quickest way to make a huge gain. So, what do we know about lottery tickets? Well, statistically, you're going to lose.
Right.
And it's the same thing with trying to get into the market too soon.
Yep.
You want to have a nest egg so that you can play with some of it after it's up to a certain amount. And again, I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you have $10,000 in a savings account and you want to play with 3 or 4 of it, that's okay. I mean, again, depending on the situation, but you don't want to save $500 and go invest that in Vanguard 500.
Yep. Yeah, so I think there's a misunderstanding there for sure because people do that. People do exactly what you just said.
Sure.
They think, they go, I want to get in the market, or they want to feel like they're investing, or they want to feel like they're an investor, and so they do that, right?
Yep.
Yep. I'll bet you see people do that sometimes.
All the time.
Interesting. Yep. So they just feel like any investing is good, no matter how small, and yeah.
And
okay.
and they believe that the market's always going to go up.
Right.
And it just doesn't.
Right. And they believe that because, well, there's a lot of talking heads that sort of imply that. I think there's right.
They talk to their Uncle Joe, who's the plumber, and he's done really good with Fidelity. So they believe him. I mean, when it comes to money, everybody lies. Right?
Yeah.
Like
so says the financial strategist.
What I'm saying is that it's like going to Vegas. Nobody ever says that they lost money in Vegas.
Right.
Everybody wins. It's like
I lost money in Vegas.
Do what?
I lost money in Vegas. Just saying.
Yeah.
What, on the slot machines?
No, on the what do you call that? Roulette.
Oh, you played roulette.
Roulette, because I like when a little ball goes around a little thing.
I've always wanted to learn how to play blackjack. Those people can really, you can really like hack the system if you figure out how to do that game right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's really good to know. That's really good to know. Okay, so a lot of people just try and do. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to say. Actually, I had friends in Denver who had like $150,000 in an IRA, I believe, and they ended up investing in a Ponzi scheme.
Oh my God, no way.
So I bring that up because, Mike, that's another thing people do besides investing, like taking, money and investing in Vanguard or Fidelity or, or buying, Apple stock or like buy the share or whatever, is people find out about an investing something or other and they go, yeah, you'll make 18% return. And what I told them when I met them was, if anybody tells you you're going to make an 18% return, that's a Ponzi scheme. Like that's not possible. Like that's not even real, and of course they didn't understand that or know that at the time. So can you say something about that? Because I think a lot of people end up the same way you're talking about, where they just want to, they want to do the quick buck thing. Like they think there's some fast way to do it. And then they end up in a Ponzi scheme and they lose a lot of money. There are people have lost ridiculous amounts of money in Ponzi schemes that sounded legit.
Right. And there's a lot of them out there. You got to really be careful.
Yep.
Wow.
It's just like gold. Like you hear these ads on the radio that gold's guaranteed to go up 60% this year.
Yep.
It's just not true. But again, it's advertising.
Right.
You really have to be careful about what you listen to. And I always err on the conservative side. If it sounds too good to be true, there's pretty good chance that it is.
Right.
And so when you're dealing with, securities in the marketplace, just be very, very conservative. If it's something that you can, that's well known, or if it's a company that's well known, generally those are legit. If you got a phone call or an email from somebody, you don't know who they are, I would just stay away from it.
Right. Don't answer your phone. Like, that's just what you should do.
Yeah,
Just don't
Yeah.
even answer it.
exactly.
One thing I wanted to pipe up and say regarding savings is a lot of musicians have really widely varied times of the year where they make more money and less money. And
Hmm.
so maybe saying, "Oh, I can save 5%, like I can manage to save 5% or 10%." Maybe when they make more, they should try for that higher percentage, knowing that
Right.
certain times of the year they might not be able to save at all. You know what I mean? That could
People
be something
people
that
make
people could think about.
people make day-to-day decisions based on how much they have in their checking account.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important to segregate your money, to get it out of your checking account into a savings account where you don't see it every day.
Right.
And so, yeah, in those, if you have those fluctuating income seasons, you want to be more aggressive in those seasons with the idea that you're going to cut back when things are lighter from an income standpoint.
Yeah, and stash it away. I have a
Yeah.
savings account I started way back when ING came out online and you could have 5% savings accounts. Like that
Yeah.
was I mean that didn't last long, but I we both signed up for that then it turned into Capital One 360 and whatever, but I it's still connected to my checking account, so I just have money shipping off very not a very much money every month, but it just goes out there and it's not even noticeable because it's small. And then like in the summer, at the end of the summer, I look in there and I'm like, oh, I forgot I had $1,000 in there, and
Right.
it's just kind of helpful.
Sure.
So like what you said, segregating things is
Hmm.
really smart because you don't see it. When you see
Right.
it, you're like, I'm
Right.
rich.
Hmm.
you know it's easy to go buy a
Right.
pair of shoes, just
Exactly.
for as an example.
Just as an example, because Tracy would
Just
never do that.
No.
no, I don't buy shoes, but I'm
That
just
would
saying,
never
like some
happen.
people do. So,
Good God. That's hilarious.
Some people buy Lululemon, some buy shoes,
right,
right?
Lululemons,
Lululemons.
That's right. You know it.
$100 yoga pants.
That's
Yeah.
right. $100 yoga, yeah, or
Yeah.
150, depending on
So
which
they can
ones
go.
you.
Oh my
So they can
gosh.
go tone.
Yeah, exactly. Tone, right. Tone with with 2 pound dumbbells.
It's all about repetitions. I'm into reps, man. I'm into reps.
It's all about the reps,
You can
exactly.
only afford 2 pound
Just
dumbbells
toning.
if you buy $120.
Anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Bulk.
probably true, Tracy, actually. So cool. I think is that it? Is that
Yeah.
all the topics you want to hit, right? I think we're good.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. That
Cool.
was great. Thank you so much,
Great.
Mike. This is
Yeah,
always
great.
very educational for me. I mean, I learned a whole lot today. I
Good.
can't wait to find out your other secrets, to be honest.
There's more. Uh,
So much more in that
Mm,
treasure chest over there.
so the final word for the day is I want one of the things I talk with people about under the heading of how you think.
yeah.
I talk to people about being a hollow reed, and it's pretty apropos. And since I'm speaking to a lot of musicians,
Yeah.
Right.
that when it comes to money, it really gets, for some reason, money really jacks people up, and it gets their thinking in all different kind of lunacy. But one of the things I try to get people to understand is that you've got to be, as you go through life, being a hollow reed means you're not clogged up with mental crap,
Mm-hmm.
that you're living from your heart, not your head. And we can talk about this at another time, but money has a way of getting us all mixed up in the head.
Yeah.
And to the extent that we can just realize it's only money, that we have life to live. And money is just a tool to allow us to get us to where we want to live the life that we want to live. Uh, and so I think my admonition for everybody would be to just think about being a hollow reed and allowing life to flow through you, and not get caught up with the lunacy around money that most people have.
That's good advice.
And
So,
actually, it really, if you think about yourself as a hollow reed, then money can flow through you, to you, from
right,
you. You know what I mean? Like if
right,
that's, if
exactly.
you can think, that's just a way to think about it.
And the idea
Yep.
of flow, yeah, because I remember hearing first the concept that money has to go out in order to go in, and that was a new concept for me to consider because
Hmm.
I always thought, oh my gosh,
Hmm.
Yeah,
I have to,
most people are trying to trap it.
yeah,
Exactly. We want to flow it through products, not to products.
Yep.
right,
Flowing money, you make money, but like you said, there's a multiplying effect when you get that flow to happen. So anyway,
right,
Awesome. Thanks,
awesome.
yeah,
Mike.
Thank you so much, Mike.
yeah, great. It's great talking to you guys.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening today. Hey, listen, please join us in the Classical Cats group on Facebook where we continue the conversations that we start on these fireside chats. You can join us at facebook.com/groups/crushingclassical. If you have more questions for Mike or you'd like to work with him, you can contact him at mike@bosefinancial.com, and I'll put his email in the show notes. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has written a review on iTunes and subscribed to the podcast. Eileen and I absolutely love reading your reviews and getting your feedback. If you haven't done one yet, head on over to iTunes now and search for Crushing Classical. There you can write a review and click subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. See you next time.